Right, you are very welcome along this Thursday morning. I had to think about that one to OTB AM. We're here with you every morning from 7:30 to 9:30. We have actually noticed over the last few days that our normal audience at 7:30 is getting out of bed a little bit later. Is that everybody's experience? Oh, and now that you've no commute in the morning, are you like crawling out of bed at 7:25 and you're actually sitting there in your tracksuit, pretty much?
Well, I'm definitely sitting here in my tracksuit most days. There's no question about that, no matter what time we're on air. And very polite of you to actually just include the audience in your sweeping generalisation there that people are getting out of bed later. I think we are both doing it as well. Certainly me. I'm definitely, yeah, no. The way you said it there is actually nail on the head. Crawling out of bed into the tracksuit bottoms as late as possible in front of the laptop.
As Shakira says, the hips don't lie, the stats don't lie. The whole point is that, we see that people are joining the show a little bit later than normal. Now, obviously, they can join the show at the start and watch the whole thing, or they can listen to the podcast a little bit later. They can subscribe on our podcast network. Just search OTB AM wherever you get your podcasts, and the best places to go loud app. But we do have a very busy show for everybody lined up this morning. Johnny Sexton's going to join us, so if anybody has any questions for him, they can WhatsApp them to us, 0879 180 180. Or, of course, you can tweet us at Off the Ball. We're going to talk about the situation with regard to Mick McCarthy's contract, where the issue that we essentially talked about yesterday has now become crystal clear. Mick McCarthy's contract runs out at the end of July, and the game will be...
We appear to have lost Mr. Ger Gilroy this morning. Ger, are you still there?
I am, yeah. Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, my apologies. That's an issue on my end. I must have cut across you. Sorry, go on.
The issue with Mick McCarthy's contract has become crystal clear. Obviously, it was due to take him through the end of our slaloming run to glory at the Euros and those matches in Dublin. Now, though, we understand that his contract is going to have expired by the time that the playoffs happen. So what do you do if you're the FAI? We'll talk about this a little bit later on, but we would like to hear from you this morning. Should Mick McCarthy be given the opportunity to, at least have that game and see out the deal that he started? Or is this the opportunity that they need to move on to the new era where Stephen Kenny, who is obviously going to be the next manager and hopefully a manager for quite a long period of time, and he gets the opportunity to do that? So questions for Johnny Sexton, we'd like to hear them, or if you've got a view on what the situation with regards to Stephen Kenny and Mick McCarthy is. But other than that, we have many things to speculate about, not the least of which is what an Irish 30 for 30 might look like, Owen.
Yeah, this is a piece that was put up on the site yesterday. The sports documentaries that Ireland wants to see. This is Arthur O'D who put this piece together for the website. I guess it's a lot of people have been digging into the series, I think, over the last couple of weeks. What are the sort of fantasy documentaries we want to see made? Like, I'm sure there's going to be a fantastic slew of Irish documentaries made over the next few years, as there has been over the last few years. But what are the ridiculous ones? If money was no object, if access was no object, what would you make? One of them here on the Off the Ball website is In Real Time, Saipan Revisited. I think that might have been your shout, Ger, to tell the entire thing.
No.
So just to explain how would Saipan in real time look if you were the hypothetical producer of this story? Is it an actual 3-4 day sort of extravaganza?
Well, I mean, yes, it is. It's like the OJ documentary was obviously was it 10 episodes, and some of them were 2 hours, or it was certainly long form. There was no limit on the amount of time that you could spend on this, and a bit like a season of 24, you could have the clock ticking and then be doing backstory. So you could have how Mick McCarthy ended up with that gruff Yorkshire accent, being the quintessential Irishman, and you tell the story of emigration and what it's like to be a young Irishman growing up in England. You can tell that story through the prism of Kevin Kilbane if you want to as well. You can go back to Mayfield and Rockmount and get the backstory of Roy Keane, all the while the tension is brooding, the training kits aren't arriving. You have the scenes in... I mean, I would argue that Saipan would be as much a physical manifestation of a state of mind as, say, for example, Albuquerque is in Better Call Saul. That, like, it's not, by all accounts, a particularly busy tourist destination. It's a bit bland and hot and dry and not a very nice place. The main tourist attraction in Saipan is a place called Suicide Cliff, where in the Second World War, people went and died as a result of suicide. There's a lot of very potent imagery on the island, and I think if you had all the money in the world, you'd be able to do a fairly amazing explanation of what happened and why it happens.
It's good. It's a good shout. Like the moment that this is on a national scale for Ireland is something you want to dig into. I love the 24 shout. Absolutely love the 24 shout. Like who is the protagonist? Who is the Jack Bauer? Who is the person that is actually guiding you through this? If money is no object, can he possibly get Roy Keane and he's the person who's leading the narrative, or is that just completely counterproductive when that's somebody who's very much in one trench or the other? I don't know. I think that's a fantastic shot. There's a couple of other ones on the Off the Ball website here. From the horse's mouth, inside Ireland's Cheltenham success. The one unquestionable success story we've allowed ourselves is Ireland's repeated success at the Cheltenham Festival. All of this between chronicling Istabrac, Moscow Flyer, Tiger Roll, Quevega. We'll experience firsthand what the build-up to Cheltenham is like, the pressure of nabbing that first win and the euphoria of crossing the line in first place, all from the horses' point of view. And then art is put into italics here. It is understood that the filmmakers may require some sort of Dr. Dolittle figure for translation purposes. What is the best version of a Cheltenham 30 for 30 you could possibly make? Because he's right. It's like when you talk about unbridled success in Irish sport, this is right up there. Our success in Cheltenham over the last few years.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and would you pick a specific horse to write the dialogue for? Wouldn't this be? Wouldn't this be? So was it? Did Johnny Liu write a conversation between two cats? Some footballers' cats. Was that one of the pieces that he wrote? Was I not over the last
sure.
20? I've read a lot of stuff over the last 24 hours, but I think that I think you could get the right people to write this in such a way that it's a conversation between two horses who are like, chatting to each other as they go to the last. Which two, I don't know. My knowledge of which are the ones that would be the most significant. Maybe it's Tiger Roll. I mean, obviously, we're not going to get to see the opportunity for Tiger Roll to make history in the Grand National this year. But maybe it is Tiger Roll because, go on.
Is there a possibility, or is there not enough in it, or is it too recent to do a good Newbridge or Nowhere documentary? Could that be your passion project as a Kildare man?
Say that again, sorry.
Is Newbridge or Nowhere ripe for picking?
I think the thing about the 30 for 30s is that they're not obvious, right? That's a fairly obvious, like, that'd be a great radio documentary that year. But like in 3 or 4 years' time after it's over, why are we doing that? What's the, you're looking at, so I don't know what your favorite 30 for 30 is, but like Once Brothers, I think, is the high water mark where you actually tell the story of two countries going to war through two individuals who were friends. Like, ultimately that Kildare team broke up. Maybe Newbridge or Nowhere is actually the end of Mayo, and that was the end of that Mayo team, and they never get back to the level where they are genuine All-Ireland contenders again, and everything that comes after that and that's the thesis for the piece. Maybe it's the thing they pin on the dressing room wall metaphorically that inspires them to greatness.
Possibly, yeah. It's definitely a figure in the most recent Mayo, and the most recent Mayo team, if you're doing a piece on them, I guess. But like, I was kind of thinking about it yesterday, right? And like, you kind of think of the big GA moments recently. Like, it's just that 30 for 30 obviously has brought so many stories to life that you would never have heard about if it were not for the series. But then at the same time, they do the really obvious stuff really well as well. Like, what wasn't the most recent multi-part series from them, or one of the more recent ones, just a Lakers versus Celtics one? Like, the most obvious rivalry in American sport. How do you take the really obvious stuff in Irish sport and actually make it better? Like something like Saipan and having new voices on the record is something that always comes to mind when you think about it, or voices expressing new opinions. That's probably where the unlimited budget fantasy element of it all comes in.
Yeah, like, it's too soon really for Mayo Dublin, isn't it? But you could do Tyrone Kerry from the noughties. That would be a sensational documentary series, wouldn't it?
It wouldn't be the best one from that series, though. I was kind of thinking about it yesterday. Clearly, Tyrone Armagh would be the best documentary from that decade, in my opinion. If you want to actually take a snapshot of a moment in time with a historical context, with a geographical context, how two counties are joined at the hip and yet absolutely despise each other. They bring each other up to the top of the mountain when they're first All-Irelands ever in the space of 12 months of one another. That is the documentary I'm fascinated with. And then you've got the slew of characters. Like Tyrone Kerry would be a good documentary, and there'd be a funny sort of element of slapstick about seeing all the Kerry lads constantly getting beaten by this team, and it'll be good. But I think Tyrone Armagh is the one.
I mean, you're obviously just trying to spoil this so that we don't get to luxuriate in 4 hours or 4.5 hours of consistent beatings. Look, I think the Tyrone Armagh aspect would be a good part of a documentary series, but the real narrative is the greatest county in GAA not being able to beat this county that had never won an All-Ireland before. This team arrived almost fully formed, and like I like the way you're trying to spoil that for us there.
Well, there's something. Have you seen the Bad Boys 30 for 30?
No. Oh, the Pistons.
Pistons. It's the exact same narrative. It's just like take out Dennis Rodman, replace him with Brian Dooher. It's sensational. Take out Bill Lambier, replace him with Peter Canavan, and you've got your documentary there. Constantly bullying and taking down the greatest, that is the Chicago Bulls. Of course, the Bulls beat them and eventually beat them and came back to win a lot of titles. So maybe Kerry don't actually have that thing to say about the rivalry with Tyrone, but it will be for the large swathe of the documentary. You could just take the Bad Boys narrative and replace Detroit Pistons with Tyrone, replace Chicago Bulls with Kerry.
Look, I think that we're doing the public a service here by talking about this. So if anybody has any other ideas or better ideas, then we'd really like to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the number you can get to us by WhatsApp. Indeed, you can also just tweet us using the hashtag OTB AM. Right, the sports news. The FAI are facing a major decision over who takes charge of the Republic of Ireland for the European Championship playoff with Slovakia. The game was postponed for a second time yesterday, with internationals unlikely to be played before September. Stephen Kenny obviously due to take over from Mick McCarthy on the 1st of August, and the FAI say that the decision to delay the playoffs is the right one. So we'll see exactly what's going to happen sooner rather than later with that one, I expect. And talks over deferring player wages during the coronavirus pandemic will continue over the next 48 hours. Senior representatives from the PFA, Premier League, EFL and the League Managers Association met yesterday without resolution. They've agreed the English season will only be allowed to continue when it's safe and appropriate to do so. Bournemouth boss Eddie Howe is the only manager so far to take a pay cut, while several clubs have furloughed non-playing staff. 8-time men's champion Roger Federer says he's devastated by the decision to cancel this year's Wimbledon Championships. 7-time women's champion Serena Williams admits she was shaken, and both will be approaching 40 by the time the All England club opens its gates again next year. There have only been 10 previous years in which Wimbledon hasn't been staged, and all were because of war. In horse racing, the current National Hunt racing season has been officially finished following the cancellation of the Fairyhouse and Punchestown festivals. It is hoped that the 2020 Irish Grand National will be staged in the winter. In cycling, the status of this year's Tour de France has become more tenuous. This year's Criterium du Dauphiné has been postponed. That's the week-long race ordinarily used as a barometer of form before the Tour de France. Tour organisers have reportedly set a deadline of May 15th to decide whether this year's race should go ahead. It's very difficult to see that going ahead at all in any circumstances at the scheduled time. Here's what's coming up. We're going to bring you through the sports pages. Our lockdown lowdown's coming your way at 8 o'clock. Ireland rugby captain Johnny Sexton is going to join us live at 8:15 this morning. We're going to talk Irish football at 8:40. That's obviously the great Mick McCarthy versus Stephen Kenny debate. Who's it going to be? The player ratings from Better Call Saul season 2. If you're not on the Better Call Saul train, then I think by the end of this, there's a few spoilers, but nothing too serious, then you should absolutely be on it. Season 2 was an absolutely brilliant bit of TV. All right, time for the newspapers.
OTB AM.
So we're going to start with offtheball.com, and it's Dave Clark talking about life with Parkinson's. He was on last night with Joe. Obviously, Dave Clark, famous from the darts and a brilliant advocate for living with Parkinson's, and he says the future for me is not bright. It's worrying times for him, obviously, with a limited amount of time left, as he talks about, and for a portion of that now to be in lockdown in the UK is not great for him. Rugby, Alan Quinlan talking about Declan Kidney. I was crying out for him to understand me. In football, we're talking about Sunderland Till I Die. There's an episode 1 review there from Kieran Bradley, who is our resident expert here at OTB on Sunderland Till I Die, which, I mean, I think a lot of people are on this train. I didn't watch the first season, so maybe it's time to binge that. Jerome Boateng was pulling a Jack Grealish and has been fined by Bayern Munich, having left Munich, which is obviously on lockdown at the moment, and crashed his car. And Bayern have decided that they're going to give all their money that they've taken from him and give it to hospitals in the Munich area. And then there's only one other one that I want to talk about. Time away with family reignited Stephen Reid's love for football. So Stephen Reid, one of the game's gentlemen, who has been talking to us here as well, and has talked about his desire to step up now and to be a more than just a first team coach, and he's definitely on that managerial train. So that's the story with offtheball.com this morning, and so I'm going to take you through what's in the back page of the Independent next. So sorry, I just lost this here for you now.
While you're looking for that,
so the back page. Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, go on if you have gone.
Yeah, Bernard Jackman here saying the virus could change the landscape of professional rugby. That's Brendan O'Brien writing there this morning. How the hurling all-stars would look if the season finished now, writes John Fogarty. Castle Island Golf Club future under threat, and I think that's going to be the future for quite a few golf clubs, I'd imagine, that are a bit off the beaten path over the next couple of weeks and months, unfortunately. Cork clubs told lockdown extends to cutting pitches, and playoff delay puts pressure on managerial succession plans. So this idea that you had the loophole for Mick McCarthy to be able to see out some of his contract with some of the playoff games this summer, that's now seems to be off the table. It's September at the earliest before Ireland will play a playoff game, it seems. And also Irish jump season over as HRI confirmed the inevitable.
Yeah, so just to take it back to the Independent, FAI poised to make a quick decision on playoffs boss. This is the story, the headline on Dan McDonald's story about what they're going to do. They're going to speak with both Mick McCarthy and Stephen Kenny once the new date is finalised by UEFA. Now, again, that might allow them to kick the can down the road a little bit, because the new date can't be finalised until there's some kind of normality, and we're obviously quite away from some normality kicking in just yet. Jump season called to halt, but Irish Grand National may yet be saved. That would be great. Obviously, it's a huge day for Fairyhouse. There also is a piece from Neil Francis talking about Dan Levy. Levy deserves to make the most of every gain after a year of pain. So there are a few players who will use this time to recover from injury and will suddenly be able to play in the Six Nations when it finishes in the autumn, who obviously would have been injured. You think of Dan Levy, for example. You think, obviously, at out half, we'll have a bit of strength and depth as well. And Cian Healy, I think, was due to maybe make the Centurion club look like his injury was going to keep him out of the rest of the Six Nations, and hopefully he'll be back in time for that as well. So that is the Independent there. And so after that, we're going to go to you've done the Examiner on. Next is the Irish Times. And so the Irish Times this morning. What have the Irish Times got for us here? I'm going to tell you now. Okay, if you want to get in touch, 0879 180 180. It's Ireland's playoff pushback as UEFA prioritise European club competitions. Hard to figure out why it took so long to cancel Wimbledon is the headline of Kevin Mitchell's piece from The Guardian. And on Long Island, longing for a return to our field of dreams is Dave Hannigan's column. I think the thing about Wimbledon is that they were trying to find a way to have it later on in the year. And it's a fairly obvious thing to do. So Kevin Mitchell hammering the organisers of the All England Club as if they didn't know that there was more important stuff than tennis going on seems a little bit disingenuous to me at this point. People are trying to make decisions based on the best information available to them. The British government's approach to what's been going on with the pandemic has been chaotic at best. At best, you would say it has been chaotic. And so if the Wimbledon organisers are scrambling around trying to go, well, is there a possibility of us having this a little bit later on in the year? Does that make any sense? Does it fit into a global calendar when September is already essentially gone for what looks like the US Open and the French Open, which again seems fairly ambitious at this point? I don't know. I would give them a bit of a break for reaching the decision. Better to make the right decision with something like this, where it actually isn't going to have any impact now on anybody. They're right to take their time, no?
Yeah, I would have thought so. As in that they're right to take their time to have actually come up with this decision, or like I don't know. It's something that, as you said, with Roland Garros having made such a land grab so quickly, it was very tough for Wimbledon to be able to actually find some time at the end of the summer. It's just such a big thing. I think just because they're ahead of the curve almost, there will be people following suit. There will be events that were scheduled to take place this summer that just won't happen. It's as simple as that. And I think the organizations that face yearly competitions are just in far bigger trouble than anybody else. And like, you look at the Olympic Games, you look at the Euros. Obviously, they're too big, and obviously not annual, so they will be able to find some sort of home next year. And I think that's almost the point as well. That if you're seeing the Olympics kind of mooting as spring games next year and then actually kicking themselves back to the summer, I'm sure that was part of a uniformity thing to just keep them in the middle of the summer. But I'm sure part of it as well was just having a few more percent of confidence in your own head that this thing will definitely go ahead. I think just trying to find something in a sport where there is four majors already and there will be four majors again next year is just nigh on impossible. And like, we just got to hope that like the football and the GEA doesn't suffer similar fates, but you have to suspect that they're in similar danger of following similar fates, because next year is coming as well, and there will be new championships and new Premier Leagues next year, and this year might just have to fall by the wayside.
Yeah, at the same time, like, is there some way of playing? Was there some way of playing Wimbledon in October? Like, the weather issue. They only have two courts with roofs, that kind of stuff. Like, it wouldn't have been amazing to have a Wimbledon in October when things are back to somewhat, well, obviously not normal, but I don't know. I would have given the organisers as long as possible to wait and see exactly how the situation evolves, as opposed to like, whoa, why didn't they make this decision last week? Okay, whatever. What's next?
The Irish Sun this morning is autumn leaves. UEFA knockout June playoff date. Mixed deal ends on July 31st. Association must make call. Gordon's run dry. Meanwhile, Gordon Elliott has backed Horse Racing Ireland's decision to end the national hunt season early due to the coronavirus crisis. Sancho's the rash decision. Meanwhile, writes Duncan Wright. This is Marcus Rashford, who says he would love for Jadon Sancho to join him at Manchester United. And how in wage hit, Eddie Howe becomes the first Premier League boss to take a coronavirus pay cut. He earns £4 million a year. So he's going to be taking a bit of a hit on his wages.
Back page of the Herald, great headline. Who's the boss? FAI to move quickly on solving manager impasse. It's the Dan McDonald story we talked about a little bit earlier on from The Independent. But it is a good question. Who is the boss and who will be the boss when the time comes for Ireland to have their playoff? They also have Mane is true to his roots. Pool ace, a rags to riches tale. Aim is still Croke Park date, says Dubs under 20s boss Gray. Pardon me. National hunt season over, but national may run is the headline on the horse racing story that obviously we've been talking a little bit about. And we'll get into more details as well on Friday Night Racing coming your way tomorrow afternoon on all of our social channels at 3:00.
The Irish Daily Star this morning leads with civil war, clubs and players ready to scrap it out over pay cuts. So this is going to be an interesting subplot to everything that's happening over the next couple of weeks. Premier League heading for civil war, writes Jeremy Cross, after being accused of living in a moral vacuum. So this is a situation where a number of top flight clubs have come together to sign up to a collective bargaining agreement to bring in wage cuts, deferrals, and the British government's furlough scheme. But the PFA are having none of this. They've written to all of its members telling them not to accept wage cuts or deferrals without speaking to them first. So there's going to be a bit of a conflict there, you'd imagine. Mixed cut may yet be permanent, says Paul Lennon. Mick McCarthy may have to take a permanent pay cut to keep his job as senior Ireland football manager, and lights out on the national hunt season.
Yeah, the Guardian is next. It says footballers told they will have to share financial pain, which you'd like to think is fairly obvious. The picture there is the Premier League chief Bill Bush stressed the financial hit that clubs face. This could all cascade pretty quickly if an agreement isn't reached, because obviously the broadcasters pay on the basis of the fact that games will be played. If games aren't played, the broadcasters won't pay, and if the broadcasters don't pay, then how are the clubs going to pay their salaries? And if the clubs don't pay the salaries, then do all the players suddenly become free agents? So football needs to come together and realise that a lot of stuff outside is having an influence, and they need to find a shared collective vision for what the future looks like. And again, that piece that the Irish Times were running from Kevin Mitchell in The Guardian, what took Wimbledon so long to see they had to cancel? But again, I guess it's easy to make these decisions when you don't actually have to make these decisions.
Absolutely. The Mirror this morning leads with Prem wages war. Clubs all set to agree pay cuts, but PFA insist they must be told first. And then on Ireland it says, make up your mind. This Kenny go on. And Wimbledon Ace is devastated but vow to return. And Punchestown Festival, the latest to go.
Okay, so for us here we have the Mail next, and that's the UK Mail. I'm just going to try and get the Irish one here for you as well. So manager mayhem, Ireland's Euro playoff postponed until later in year. Move leaves McCarthy, Kenny succession plan in disarray. It's fair. That's fair, dog. This is that plan is now in disarray. What looked like it was going to be a very seamless transition between one campaign to the next as a result of the global pandemic now looks like it is a pig's Mickey. Federer vows he'll be back on centre court as Wimbledon cancelled, and Mullins earns crown after season axed. So ultimately, not the way he would have wanted it, but Willie Mullins is the leading chums trainer again in Irish racing. And then how about that? They've obviously got a picture of Eddie Howe because he's the first one from the managerial ranks to break rank and to take a pay cut at Bournemouth. So fair play to Eddie Howe.
The London Times this morning leads with Wimbledon off. Showpiece of tennis grass court season is cancelled for first time since 1945 over coronavirus concerns. And Martin Ziegler and Matt Lawton writing about the Member of Parliament's moral vacuum dig at top stars. So this came from Julian Knight. This has been a moral vacuum line has been used in a lot of the newspapers. Julian Knight, MP and the chairman of the Digital Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee, has been speaking about this, and this is in light of clubs like Spurs, Newcastle, Norwich and now Bournemouth announcing their intention to use the government furlough scheme to meet the pay demands of non-playing staff without first asking their first team superstars for support. So Knight has responded to that, saying this is not what the scheme is used for. It sticks in the throat. This exposes the crazy economics in English football and the moral vacuum at its centre. In fairness, it is not a good look when the players have not been approached first for a pay cut and automatically the non-playing staff have been told to get on the furlough scheme, take pay deferrals, whatever. I think it's you can't really you're with Julian Knight really on this. It's hard to see how you can't make a case for this that the players need to have taken something already in a lot of cases.
And the Telegraph this morning, the headline is "Pandemics Stop Play." Pandemic stops play. So obviously, this is the tennis parlance. Racing stops, or rain stops play. Play suspended, and they also have the Premier League fears players will resist wage cuts as talks stall. So it is kind of amazing that they haven't been able to do a deal, as you're talking about there. There's going to be a lot of public pressure on everybody to do a deal and come up with some kind of way forward, because it could get very nasty very quickly. So look, a couple of comments that coming in I just wanted to talk about briefly. Seamus Cohen says, greetings from the home of golf. St Andrews from Tipperary. Gail, how you doing, Seamus? Hope you're well. Johnny Kennedy, good morning to you. Johnny, how are you? Says, with the Open being cancelled now, does Shane Lowry get to keep the claret jug until 2021? I mean, that's a good question. I would expect yes. Does he? Is that like, are they gonna send it?
100%. It's like absolutely. Just let him keep it for another year. Let him go to the Boar's Head with it. Who was Boar's Head, of course, voted best pub in Dublin, winner of the World Cup of Pubs that was run on the Paddy Power Twitter account there yesterday.
The Boar's Head, was it? It was like a right. It was a big outsider at the start yesterday.
16-1, and I think a few of my mates actually had real money on the Boar's Head, and they were happy enough with their bank balance perhaps at the end yesterday. A little bit of light in these dark times provided by the Boar's Head. Not the first time the pub has done that for people, I'd imagine.
Okay, so loads of comments rolling in on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/off the ball. You've got the Irish News there if you have it.
Yes, the Irish News. We are looking here at a story from Mark Bradley, who Just to read out the first paragraph, the headline reads, Red Hand Bradley faces long wait until next paycheck. No football, no job, nowhere to go. This is the world Mark Bradley shares with countless others in a time of unprecedented crisis. As a substitute primary school teacher without a full-time position, the Tyrone forward is effectively excluded from the safety net containing emergency government funding packages for workers. Despite a regular working pattern, he finds himself without support and with time in his hands to gaze into an uncertain future. So it's tough times indeed for Mark Bradley. Just that quote that they've placed there saying, looking at emails from the teachers union, there's a possibility that the board might give us an average of what we would have worked. That would be great, but that's not guaranteed. For the time being, there's no income, and there's quite a few people in the same situation. And Woods says schools final will be played when it's safe. That's to do with the Danske Bank, McRory and McLaren Cup finals up in Ulster. And really, when you read Mark Bradley, there are two different sides of two unbelievably different sides of the sporting world that we deal in. There's somebody like Mark Bradley, doesn't know where his next paycheck is coming from, and then professional footballers in the Premier League who are going to fight to not get pay cuts, it seems.
Yeah. Definitely different worlds. All right. Some of the comments on the 30 for 30. Tommy Walsh, the Tullaroan Warrior, says, Canty on YouTube, look, obviously any documentary on Tommy Walsh is going to be sensational, but Lakewood Gale have already done that. So our contention with all of this is that you have to have a slightly different approach to it. You can't just do a straight Commoner Garden Tommy Walsh doc. What you could do is the history of Tullaroan, where, you know, he talks about this being the most important hurling club in the country for a period of time, and then the restoration. So maybe it's actually their journey to All-Ireland glory and the All-Ireland final, where his brother ends up giving that amazing speech. So it's the whole family, maybe, but you're telling that kind of history, and that's actually a way of accessing the history of St. Kieran's College and also the history of Kilkenny hurling. Is that a way to do it? I'm not sure.
Possibly. I think when you think about Kilkenny, I think the same logic could apply to your Tyrone Kerry documentary. Find the unsuccessful Kilkenny people and make a documentary about them, because there is always an interest in that. There is always an interest in the most successful county in any sport being not successful, going through hardship. And I guess even as a club, Tullaroan have gone through a few decades there without a trophy. Isn't that correct? Until last year. So that's something, although your kind of sympathy for Tullaroan hurlers is always limited because they are from Kilkenny.
Okay, and then Canty says, I'm still waiting for my OTB AM mug for Reeling the Years suggestion for crappy quiz. Is that where you ripped it off, Owen? You took Canty's suggestion in the YouTube comments, you went, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Well, if you actually listened to the start of the crappy quiz, I have credited Canty with the idea. So the credit's been given. Thank you, Canty. 100% deserving of an OTB AM mug. Once we get them, once this thing is all over, the first thing we're going to do is, like, you may think that we're all going to go for pints or something like that. No, we're going to get OTB AM mugs made, and you'll be the first person to get one, because it's been a game changer. It's been a roaring success so far, and one of the best suggestions we've ever got in the comments.
Axel is another suggestion which comes from Canty for a 30 for 30 documentary, and look, obviously an amazing subject matter. That would be, you could do it on the figure of eights that the Ireland team did before the game in Chicago, and you could trace it back from there and why they did that and how that came to be, and then that is actually the story of why Anthony Foley had such an impact on so many people in Irish rugby. And it would be an opportunity as well to just watch some of his greatest performances, which I think probably people forget about, just how great a rugby player he was. It's like one of those careers where somebody goes into coaching and you talk about them as a coach, and you kind of a lot of the time forget about the player and just how influential Anthony Foley was on all the big days. And I'm sure the Munster fans don't in any way forget that, but it would be an opportunity to just revisit all that good stuff.
100%. And also as well, the week that was in Chicago and the Axel angle, the beating the All Blacks angle, you've got a few things. You could definitely do an Irish version of June 17th, 1994, which is personally my favourite. 30 for 30, very simple process, just going through one of the craziest days in US sport, from the OJ car chase to what was game 5 of Rockets against Knicks at the time. You had Arnold Palmer playing his final round at the 94 US Open. Like, obviously the very, very obvious one from an Irish perspective is that Super Saturday in 2009 when Bernard Dunn is a world champion and when Ireland are Grand Slam champions. But the Chicago week is as interesting between Trump, between the Cubs, between the All Blacks, and the commemoration for Anthony Foley.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we're going to take a quick break. If you want to get in touch with us, you can get us on WhatsApp. 0879 180 180 is the number. You can also get us on Twitter at Off the Ball, or at Off the Ball AM is the specific Twitter handle for OTB AM, which is with you every morning from 7:30 until 9:30. We'll be back with the Lockdown Lowdown, and then we're going to be talking with Johnny Sexton next.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. OTB Sports Radio.
If you're feeling a little like you're going a bit stir crazy, take a break and listen to Richie's Isolation Mix. 1 hour of ad-free music every day from midday on OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the Go Loud app.